Hello and welcome to our tutorial. So last week we made a glass and we spun it around and we did some complicated enough things. We got to put it on an image. So what we're going to try today is we're going to make a cup. So not too dissimilar or not too far away from a glass, but what we're going to try and do this week is not include any photographic references, so it's just going to be an image of a cup on a table, and we're going to make everything in 3D, so it's going to be a completely fake object, we hope. And we're going to have a little, see what fun we can have on the way. So let's go. So we're going to start by deleting our default cube. We're going to start with a circle. And by default the circle has 32 verts, so we're going to leave that in. I'll look from the side and go into edit mode, extrude upwards, and then we'll press S to scale it up a little bit, and then extrude upwards to a value of, say, of 2. So we'll make a kind of a coffee cup, and then we will hold this, select the bottom and then press F, so we have a face on the bottom. Now actually let's undo that. Let's select that and go E, escape, scale it in, E, scale it in, and then F. And the reason I've done that is well, it'll actually become apparent in a while. We would have got a bad pattern here had we not had more geometry. So that's fine. I'm going to take this circle here, and I'm going to go Shift D and then escape, which is to duplicate it, and then I'm going to say or X 90. So rotate it on 90, and I'm going to go G, place it there, and then I want to delete all of these inside ones. So I'm going to go A, and then B, box select. I'm going to select that and go X. Now, let's have a look at this. So I'm going to go GY, and then EY. So we've kind of made a handle. Now, what you'll notice is there is no width to this, no sort of girth. So it looks like a paper cup. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to start adding a couple of modifiers and seeing what we can, if we can make this look a bit better. So the first thing I'll do is I'll hit smooth, and then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier. Now that has caused a problem with where the handle joins the cup, so let's just fix that. So let's take this handle and we'll go GX and make sure it intersects. Now we've an additional problem now that it's on the inside, but we'll worry about that a bit later. And then we'll select these two here and do the same. We'll go GX and move it inside, so that there's a definite contact between the handle and the side of the cup. So the next modifier we're going to add is a solidify modifier, and let's start playing with that. So we're going to change the thickness here, so we can make the thickness on the outside or on the inside. So that's not too bad. So now we go back into edit mode. I can select these two and go GX and try and hide them in the wall of the cup, and do the same here. We go GX and hide them there. Okay, so now we have a decent looking cup. So let's go back into edit mode and select it all, and we're going to go U and unwrap and see what we get. So we'll split our view and go into the UV image editor, and this is our cup. So I didn't do too good a job there. I'm just going to select the center and go S, scale all this up a bit. Okay, so that's not too bad now. So I'm going to open an image. It's it's not a terribly exciting image, called cup texture, and that's it there. And we are going to use this. Now we're in the cycles render engine. I'm going to come over here and select my default material. I'm going to have to click at use nodes, and then I need to open up, oh, not Windows, this one here, and open up a node editor. Now I'm going to select this here and delete it, and I'm going to add in two things, two nodes. First one is a texture, so we're going to add in an image texture, and that's going to be our cup. And then we're going to add in a principled shader. And then we have to connect these up, so the color goes in here, and then the output goes to the surface. And let's go into rendered mode. So now this is our cup. Now we can have a bit of fun with this, so I can go S, or bring it in, make it a bit smaller. And if we turn around the cup, we'll see that some of it is smooth, because this part of the image is smooth, and some of it, but the handle has this kind of mottled pattern on it as well. So let's just take all of this. Again, we can use L to select all selected, or all connected. And we can just scale this down, move that to there. So this mottled pattern is over the entirety of the cup. Okay, so that's not too bad. Now we can add in some specularity. We can add in a slight kind of metallic sheen, and down here we can put in a little bit of transmission, so it's I won't say it's glowing, but and this clear coat here will add in what is effectively like a varnish on it, like it was lacquered, so we can start to see we're getting highlights here from our lighting. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to go Shift A and add in a plane, and scale the plane up, say by a factor of 5. I'm going to go into edit mode. Let's go back to solid mode here so we can see what we're doing. U unwrap, it's over here. Now I'm going to open a new image called wood. Put that here. I'm going to have to create a new material for this. Again, we'll call it wood. Now where is wood here in my, there it is. So again, delete this diffuse the shader, and we're going to add in two nodes, an image texture node for the wood, and then our principled shader. And the principled shader has basically replaced most of these, because it has, like, so this is glossy, so it has a slider for glossy. Yeah, it's so I imagine in the next version of Blender this will be in place when you create a new material by default. Okay, so let's have a look at what we've got here. So now what we've got is something a little more interesting. Now let's pause and look through the camera. So this is what the camera can see. So let's go into object mode and then use this tool here, lock camera to view. So I can set it up so that my camera is only so I'm not seeing any extraneous background. So I'm going to select my graph. I have to remember to turn this off actually. I always forget that. So scale up the wood just a little bit. There we go. So now we've got our cup. Now, so that's all well and good. And if we're, we'll render this out now and we'll see what we get. So I'm set the CPU rendering, so I'm going to set it to full frame to HD. It's a PNG file, which is fine, and or GPA. We're not going to have any transparency in it, so that's doesn't bother me too much. I'm going to go to my user preferences and try and turn on my graphics card. So I go System, and then turn this on here. It says CUDA, and then GeForce. So if you have none selected here, turn that on. And then over here, I can swap from CPU to GPU compute. And it's not going to make it look any better, it's just be faster. So I'm going to take my cup and rotate it on X. Let's do that. And actually, no, we'll leave the handle on the other side. Yeah. So I was going to render this and see what we get. Actually, sorry, one last thing before we render it. Let's change some of these settings here. So sampling is basically a quality setting. It's how many samples, how many times it refines the kind of the edges, etc., and works out the quality of the image. So if you increase this hugely, you'll get a much better quality image. But we'll set this to say, because we're just doing effectively a test render, set it to 50. That'll speed things up. And I'll set my preview, which is this window here, how many samples there are, we'll set that to 10. And then here under performance, this is sort of important, I'm going to set this to 512 for both of them, and this is basically the size of the squares, which we'll see in a minute that it renders. And this will speed up our render time hugely. So press render, zoom out a little bit, and so this is 512 by 512, this square, relative to the setting we did down here. And we'll go full screen and see what we've got. Okay, so this is not too bad at all, but we're going to try and add a few little extras to this to see if we can improve the quality of it. So here's the finished render, and you know, it looks good, but we've a few things that we want to play around with to improve the look of this, to add to our sort of portfolio of hopefully photorealistic images. So the next thing we want to do is we want to this looks very flat, so we want to make sort of add in more detail, kind of like almost like bump detail in this image. So we'll go back to our 3D view and we'll put ourselves kind of looking along this flat plane here. So I'm going to move my image texture out a little bit because I'm going to use that again, and I'm going to add what's called a normal map. Add that in here, and I'm going to take the image and put that as my input to the normal map, and then take the normal output here and plug it in here. This is basically like a bump map, and you can see it's got very dark because it's got a strength of 1. So we'll go back to 0, and that's basically where we started, and we can add in increase this number, and it should give us the effect of making it feel or look more like there's a raised surface area. So that's the first thing we're going to do. I'm going to leave it maybe, that's not bad there. And the effectiveness of your bump map is greatly enhanced or changed by the lighting. So let's have a look at our light now. So we'll go to our lamp, and we'll make it a sun. And let's just have a look at what angle the sun is pointing at. So it's pointing that way. So let's give it a more sort of acute angle. So we're going to have a longer shadow. And we'll look through, and then now we can see our bump map a little more detail. So here's my plane. Maybe we'll reduce it a little bit. There we go. Now we can do the same here with our porcelain cup. We can add in a bump map, but we don't want to do that. We want the surface of it to be smooth. So we're not going to add in. We're not going to use this image as a normal map. Oh, I haven't connected there. Disconnect that. So we want it to be smoother. That made a huge difference actually. Alright. So So that's not bad either. But we've one more thing we want to do just before we finish up, to make this image more photorealistic. One of the interesting parts of the word photorealistic is the word photo. So what we're going to do is we're going to emulate a depth of field, and that's, I suppose, in many respects what this video is about. So I'm going to go from the top. I'm going to look down at our cup, and I'm going to add an empty. Now you may say, what is an empty? So let's go to wireframe mode. An empty is nothing, basically. It's a point in 3D space. So I'm going to place it here, and I'm going to call it focus. And while I'm at it, I might as well name all my other things. So this is this plane, we should call this table, and this circle we should call cup. Now let's go back to this empty, and its position is interesting, so we can move it backwards and forwards on Y. That's all I'm really interested in. I'm going to select my camera, and down here at the bottom of the camera tab it has depth of field. So let's look through the camera and go into rendered mode, and then let's set the depth of field to focus on this empty, this focus point, and then we can set the depth of field. So I've set it to be 0.001, and not a lot has changed. Let's up that a good bit. And one thing we need to do, this will make a big difference, is we need to set, it says shading, so in this viewport here you need to turn on depth of field. Okay, so let's set it to, say, a setting of 1. So now you can see that there's a strip in the middle of this table that's in focus, and the rest of the image isn't. So I'm going to go GY, and I'm going to move that back. Oh, hang on. Sorry, I have my camera selected and not that focus point. So GY. Okay. And then let's move it in here. So let's go into wireframe mode, and let's place this up here on sort of the lip of the cup. And let's look back through. Sorry, we go GX. So I place it on the lip of the cup, and go back to rendered mode. So now you can see the lip of the cup is in focus. So if I go back to my camera, now obviously this is a very large value. Let's set this to 0.5. And more of the cup is in focus, but let's make it 0.05. And maybe we've gone too far, so we'll set this to a value of 0.2, and that's not too bad there. So just what we're trying to do is we're trying to get ourselves to a point where we're taking or rendering out an image. We're trying to fake photorealism, and one of the characteristics of a photo is that depth of field. And by having this point, this focus point, that we can manipulate and move throughout the image, we could have the table corner here in focus and the rest of the image out of focus. By moving this around, we can emulate depth of field that we would get in a real world photograph. So I'm going to save this. We'll call it put on my desktop, we'll call it cup. And actually I'm going to pack all of the images in, so that when I'm in college tomorrow with you, we have all of this, the images already preloaded, and I'm just going to render this out now, and we'll see what our final image looks like. So it should take about 50 seconds or so to render. So you can see this is all way out of focus in the background, and we're coming into focus around the cup. The bottom of the cup is slightly out of focus, and what we're hoping is this lip around the top of the cup is sharp. Yeah, that's not too bad at all. So this is our first attempt to use depth of field in our renders to try and get a good looking, hopefully photorealistic render. Okay, that's enough for now.